Part 33. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 321. In the Devil's Triangle, on a huge warship. The Warring States General had just hung up the phone bug in his hand, turned around and said to a group of senior Navy generals around him, "We have witnessed the information that the Black Narwhal, the overlord of the deep sea, has passed through the Fishman Island. It won't be long before Kajgros Orgrim will arrive here. What about the rest of the people? There shouldn't be only one ship, right?" Kuzin asked strangely. The Warring States General said the troops are divided into two groups. There is also intelligence to prove that the Warhammer pirates formed a fleet of 30 ships, following the Black Narwhal. They're not very far apart. They should be the receiving troops. That makes sense, but I wonder which ship that Orgrim is on, Consultant Ahe asked softly. The Warring States General shook his head, and then said, "There is no witness information in this regard for the time being, but the people over at the CP agency told us with certainty that Kajgro Orgrim is on board the Black Narwhal. So after I wait for the Black Narwhal to show up, do I take action immediately?" Sakaski asked in a deep voice. "After all, if the pirate fleet enters the encirclement, it will be more troublesome to capture Orgrim. Once the chaotic battle begins, the possibility of his escape cannot be ruled out," Porisalino also said softly. "If the outer fleet can stop the pirates when we surround the Black Narwhal, with our strength and a quick battle, we should be able to capture Orgrim." Kuzin also nodded and said. However, the Warring States General still shook his head and said with a very calm look, "No, before Orgrim's appearance is truly confirmed, even if the pirate fleet is allowed to come in, we can't take action. We must ensure that Orgrim appears. This is our fundamental goal. For this reason, the Warring States General would rather take a little more risk. Otherwise, once the operation here is launched, it will be discovered that there is a problem with the intelligence from the CP agency, and Orgrim is not on the flagship at all. That will be called really sitting on the wax. By then Orgrim will whether Reem turned around and left with the fleet, or used him as the main attack and attacked directly from the periphery. It would have a great impact on the Navy's encirclement tactics." After a few days, a huge ship appeared around the Devil's Triangle. The pirate ship is slowly sailing into the fog. This ship is the Black Narwhal, the flagship of the Warhammer pirates. At this time, Dai-Pen maintains the appearance of Orgrim, carrying the destruction on his back. Hammer, standing on the bow of the deck, watched the ship gradually sail into the fog, and felt a little nervous. Stussy stood beside her with a smile and said, "Don't worry, enter the fog. It will take some time to reach the trap designed by Moria and the Navy. If you say this, I will be more worried." "Okay," Dai-Peng smiled helplessly. "The plan is just that. As long as you don't reveal your identity and attract the appearance of the Navy, the dominance of the situation will be reversed and fall into our hands." Stussy said softly. "Hope so," Dai-Pen nodded. The Black Narwhal's speed was very fast, and it didn't take long before it penetrated deep into the fog. In this fog that cannot see sunlight all year round, the visible distance is very poor, only more than 100 meters. After driving for about half a day, a huge island appeared in front of Dai-Peng. "Is that Moria's ship?" "The world's largest pirate ship, a terrifying three-mast sailing ship," Dai-Peng asked curiously. "That's right." Stussy nodded. At the same time, on the Navy warship, the Warring States General also had an excited look in his eyes. He hung up the phone in his hand and said to everyone, "Get ready for action. Black Narwhal, the number has appeared." The huge Black Narwhal slowly approached Moria's ship. Then, Dai-Peng and Sphinx saw the tall figure of Moonlight Moria, standing by the port. "Start your show," Stussy whispered softly. Dai-Peng nodded slightly, and then his aura changed, and he suddenly felt arrogant. "Gee, ha 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 ha, I didn't expect it to be you, Moria. I haven't seen you for many years. How dare you, a loser, come to provoke me? Who gave you the courage? Navy? World government? Or maybe it's the false reputation of the King's 7 martial arts that confuses your low IQ. Dai Peng had an evil and arrogant smile on his face, and laughed at Mariah. The first time Mariah saw Dai Peng, he was certain in his heart, Orgrim, you idiot, is finally here. Orgrim. Don't be too arrogant, you, Moria wanted to taunt Orgrim. But before he could finish his words, Dai Peng waved his hand directly and said arrogantly, stop talking so much nonsense to me, Mariah, I'll give you a chance and bring Enelu out to me now. Send it back so that I can spare your life, otherwise I will blow your head off right now. As soon as he finished speaking, Orgrim, who was transformed by Dai Peng, slammed the doom hammer on his back. He took it off and held it in his hand. And the doom hammer gradually turned red, and the hot breath spread out from Dai Peng's hand. Garp, who was far away in Moria Castle, suddenly became happy. He picked up the phone and said over their warring states, it should be Orgrim. Those bitches in the CP agency still have some skills. Did you see them take action? The warring states general asked over the telephone bug. Not yet, but the arrogant momentum and the heated war hammer you mentioned can prove that this guy should be Orgrim, Garp said quickly. Hold on, the warring states general said solemnly. What are you waiting for? Garp asked impatiently. A warhammer can't prove anything. We can only confirm it after Orgrim actually fights Moria, the warring states general said very seriously. Garp was silent for a while, and then said I know. Stussy was also observing the situation anxiously at this time. Why hasn't the Navy come yet? Hasn't Orgrim already appeared? It seems that the Navy doesn't believe the intelligence given by their CP-0 at all. Thinking of this, Stussy glanced at Dai Peng and gave him a wink. Dai Peng sighed helplessly, turned the warhammer in his hand, pointed at Moria and continued, have you considered it? Moria calmed down a little, and then cursed angrily, Orgrim, don't bully others too much. Gee ha 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 ha, it seems that you are seeking death yourself, Dai Peng laughed evilly. Then he stamped his feet violently, and flew out of the black narwhal at an extremely fast speed. The warhammer in his hand slammed towards Moria. Coming, Garp must have thought excitedly. Mariah's expression also changed. He pulled out his big scissors from behind, and with a domineering look, he struck out at Orgrim. 80, Dai Peng imitated Orgrim and shouted loudly in the air, and the warhammer in his hand roared. The powerful force slammed into Moria's big scissors, and the armed domineering energy of the two people burst out instantly. As an animal-type phantom beast-type user, Dai Peng's power is already very powerful, but Moria is just a superhuman type, and there is nothing he can resist here. A hammer blow directly knocked his big scissors. Then, Dai Peng landed with his feet on the ground, swinging the warhammer, and hit Mariah in the stomach again. The hot air flow swirled, and the heat wave stirred up the sand and dust on the shore, making the vision slightly blurred. Faced with this menacing attack with the hammer, Mariah panicked. The ability of the shadow fruit was activated instantly, and a shadow blocked him. The warhammer in Dai Peng's hand hit the shadow barrier directly, with powerful power and a burning breath, directly smashing the shadow open. But this is Moria's ability after all. It is just an ordinary hammer and does not break anything. On the other side, Garp's brows frowned slightly, feeling that something was wrong. This Orgrim's combat power didn't seem to be displayed. However, he had not fought against Orgrim for many years, and for a while, he was a little unsure. At this moment, as the smoke and dust slightly obscured the line of sight, coupled with the difference between Dai Peng's body shape and Moria's body shape, after the two got close, Moria's lowered sight was slightly blocked. And Dai Peng suddenly pulled him out of his arms. A volley shell hit the shadow barrier with one palm. Ning Kong wave charging palm, Dai Peng shouted in a low voice. At the same time as her voice fell, a powerful impact burst out from her hand in an instant. In just an instant, Moriya's shadow had been shattered into pieces. The barrier was directly shattered by the impact. It was too late, but Moriya had no intention of doubting Orgrim's identity at this time. He also knew the impact of Orgrim. The force was so powerful that he had no intention of resisting. The Shadow Mage's ability was activated, and he escaped from this place in an instant and distanced himself from Orgrim. Dai Peng only felt his arms swell, and he was struck by Baze. The side effects are indeed very good, but that's it. With her strength, she won't feel any special discomfort. On the other side, Garp, who was still a little skeptical at first, suddenly became happy and looked at the phone bug. Said, it's that bastard Orgrim. Warhammers can be borrowed, but can devil fruit abilities also be borrowed? He used the power of impact to directly repel Moriya. Garp didn't see very clearly here, and he didn't dare to use his haki randomly to avoid being discovered by Orgrim. He thought Orgrim used his ability to directly fight off Moriya. In fact, it was Moriya himself who frightened himself, and did not dare to directly receive the impact of the row of shells, and took the initiative to retreat. If he really ate the power of the row of shells, he might still feel strange. Why is Orgrim's impact so weak? On the other side, the Warring States General's expression was also happy, with a smile on his face, and said, finally confirmed, execute the plan. Once our fleet surrounds the Black Independent Orgrim, Garp, take action and intercept Orgrim to prevent him from getting on the ship and sneaking away under the sea. No problem, Garp responded quickly. After hanging up the phone, the Warring States General put away the smile on his face and said in a deep voice, the plan has begun. Orgrim has confirmed his identity and started taking action. Soon, the Navy's warship broke through the fog and appeared in the sea area. With a successful smile in his eyes, Stussy took out the surveillance phone and began to take these clips and photos. At the same time, the Terrorist 3 on the sailing ship, a powerful momentum suddenly erupted. As soon as Stussy turned his head, the surveillance phone bug in his hand happened to capture the scene of the naval hero Garp falling from the sky and punching Orgrim. Cap, Dai Peng was shocked and said. The warhammer in his hand was immediately placed across his chest, as if he wanted to resist the blow. But as Garp's punch fell, Dai Peng only felt an irresistible wave coming from his hand. With such power, the person was knocked upside down. And Garp, who made the punch, looked a little surprised. What's going on? Didn't you say that this guy is very strong? Why can't I feel it? Then, Garp, seeing the black narwhal diving quickly, he didn't pay attention to Orgrim's intention at all, and his expression became even more surprised. I wish you good luck and good fortune, Dai Peng. While praying, Stussy quickly took out her phone bug and started to contact Orgrim. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 322. At the same time, in the underground slave factory of Holy Land Marijoya, Orgrim was pushing the gear, looking uninterested. At the beginning, he even taught the Sphinx to cherish this opportunity, and he would not be able to push it back even if he wanted to. Now that a few days have passed, Orgrim also feels bored with this boring mechanical work. I was thinking, why hasn't there been any news from Stussy? At this moment, Orgrim's chest muscles suddenly felt a vibration. Then a smile appeared on Orgrim's face, and he stopped what he was doing. When he stopped, the Sphinx and Neiman who were following him also stopped at the same time. The other two slaves who were pushing the gear couldn't push it anymore and looked at these three guys in surprise. Then, Tiger, who was not far in front, also looked at Orgrim with a somewhat excited expression. Then, he watched Orgrim tear open the muscles in his chest, and the bloody scene unfolded. Out. And Orgrim took out a small telephone bug from the chest. As soon as the phone bug came out, it started chirping randomly, attracting the attention of many slaves. There are two supervisors in the distance with confused expressions. I wonder what these people are doing. Why did a phone bug suddenly come out of the body? Slave. Phone bug. Hello, the overseer waved his whip and ran towards Orgrim. Orgrim didn't even look at them. He picked up the phone and said, Stussy. Orgrim. Our plan has been achieved, you can start taking action. Stussy said excitedly. Yeah, Orgrim said with an evil smile on his lips. Then, he saw the whip in the hand of an overseer swing towards Orgrim. You lowly, damned slave, where did you hide the phone bug? The overseer cursed angrily. Just when the whip was about to hit Orgrim, Niemann reached out and grabbed the whip with great precision. Then she suddenly pulled off her mask and looked at the slave. The supervisor said, didn't you see that my captain is busy? At the same time as the voice fell, Niemann exerted force in her hand, followed the long whip, and pulled the overseer over from above. She pinched the overseer's neck accurately with one hand, and then smashed it to the huge on the gear. With a bang, the overseer's head was smashed onto the gear like a watermelon, with red and white splattering everywhere. The slaves around were all shocked, and the other supervisor who had just arrived was also shocked, turned around and wanted to run away. Come over, the Sphinx took the whip, raised his hand, and wrapped it directly around the overseer's waist. He raised his hand and pulled the overseer over. With one hand, he grabbed the headless corpse of the overseer. Pulling out the revolver, Sphinx's eyes flashed with excitement and said finally, I don't have to hold it in anymore, I'll shoot you in the head. At the same time as the voice fell, there was a gunshot, and the Sphinx shot the overseer's head directly. Ha 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 ha, although the firepower is not very good, it can barely be used, the Sphinx turned the revolver in his hand and said happily. At the same time, Orgrim also hung up the phone bug in his hand. The self-healing power in his body spread rapidly, and the wounds on his chest and face in the blink of an eye, the scars on my body were restored to their original state by the self-healing power that had been accumulated for a long time. With a soft click, Orgrim suddenly opened his arms and tore off the iron chain shackles on his arms. Then Orgrim stretched out his waist comfortably and said, the game is over, let's start action. As soon as he finished speaking, several slaves looked at him in surprise and exclaimed, it's him. The chaos source. Hosgarot Orgrim. Why is he here? We are saved. Our freedom has come. Seize the opportunity. Escape from Marijoya, Fisher Tiger seized the opportunity and roared. As soon as he finished speaking, the slaves all became excited, stopped what they were doing, chanted, and started running wild. Report. Report, riot occurred in the slave area of the automatic walkway, stuck, an overseer is using a telephone bug to report the news here. As a result, before he could even finish his words, a slave from the Longhand clan suddenly covered his mouth, and then wrapped the iron chain shackles in his hands directly around the guy's neck, and strangled the overseer with all his strength. Strangled to death. Although the news here was still exposed, no one knew that Orgrim was here. A large number of slaves began to go berserk, and Tiger led them to charge outside. Within a moment, the slaves in the entire moving walk area went crazy. In front of Pongal Castle, 2 guards are standing at the gate of the castle. On the ground in front of them, the moving walk just extends to this place, which is regarded as the end point. Strange, why did this moving walk stop? A guard said curiously. There must be a broken gear somewhere, right? The other guard smiled and replied. As soon as he finished speaking, a shock wave suddenly exploded from the ground, and the broken gear flew up from the ground, smashing the 2 guys into a pulp. Then, Orgrim's figure was seen gradually walking out of the opened gap, followed by a large group of slaves. After these slaves came out, they acted like crazy, crying and running around. Gradually it turned into a big commotion. Tiger did not run around, but followed Orgrim and asked, do you need me to lead the way? Have you been to Pongal Castle? Orgrim asked with a raised eyebrow. No. Tiger shook his head very frankly and said. Gee ha 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 ha, Then what path are you taking? If you can tell me how to get to this castle from the underground, you have fulfilled our agreement, so get out of here quickly, but don't get caught." Orgrim waved his hand, laughed and said. Tiger's eyes showed a look of gratitude, and then said, "Boss Orgrim, I will keep your kindness in mind. If you need my help for anything in the future, please don't hesitate." After saying that, seeing Orgrim nodding, Tiger didn't hesitate anymore, turned around and fled with the slaves. As for how he could leave Marijoa, Orgrim didn't know. Nosy, if he can't even do this kind of thing, then it can only be said that his own life is bad. At the same time, in the World Government Headquarters building, the 5 old stars also became irritable. "Suppress those damn slaves and kill them all," Wu Lao Xing cursed angrily. Here they were listening to the situation report from the Warring States period. Suddenly, Marijoa's slaves rioted, which made them very irritated. But at this time, they didn't think much about it. I casually ordered to suppress it. From the ruins, I walked into the square of Pongal Castle. It was very empty and there were no people around. When the World Conference was not started, Pongal Castle was almost idle. During the World Conference, royal families from various countries will be arranged to live here. The riots outside are still continuing, but no one in Pongal Castle is paying attention yet. No one thought that the slaves who escaped from the moving walkway would. If you run inside, isn't that asking for death? Bang bang bang. Rhythmic gunfire sounded from time to time in the castle. Orgrim walked very leisurely, following the route planned by Doflamingo in his memory, and kept moving towards the main hall where the Void Throne was. Next to him, Sphinx had several pistols hanging on his body. Whenever there were guards, Sphinx could always get rid of these minions immediately. In the main hall where the Throne of the Void is located, a large number of members of the Marigio guards are gathering here. The leader of the team is holding a phone and reporting something. "It's true, Hosgarot Orgrim, Karanda Neiman, the Sphinx. They're inside Pongal Castle and we need backup." Before he could finish his words, a powerful shockwave instantly broke open the closed door. The ruins and tumbling stones directly wiped out all the guards here. Then, Orgrim Strong the figure stepped into the hall, raised his eyes, and saw the Void Throne high above. "This is, Throne of the Void?" Neiman looked at the empty throne with some curiosity and whispered softly. The Sphinx was very curious. I ran up the long and narrow steps excitedly. Orgrim thought that this little lowly was going to sit on the throne, but the result was good. She ran directly to the various swords around the throne and pulled out one of the sabers without hesitation. "It seems to be a very valuable thing," the Sphinx gestured with the sword in his hand and said excitedly. "This seems to be the sword of the 20 kings of the world government 800 years ago. It must be very valuable." Neiman also said excitedly. Orgrim stepped in front of the throne, looked at the throne that symbolized equality and non-dictatorship, and then sat down with a smile on his lips. "Gee ha 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 ha, I am the king of the world," Orgrim laughed loudly. At this moment, a spotlight suddenly flashed, and then, there was a soft click. Orgrim lowered his head towards the main entrance of the hall that had been shattered by him. I looked over. I saw a birdman taking pictures of the 3 Orgrim people with excitement on his face. "Morgans," a smile appeared on the corner of Orgrim's lips and he called out. The birdman stopped his movements and said excitedly, "This is our first meeting, Lord Orgrim. I didn't expect that he would be in Marijo's house. When I saw you, I thought you were in the Devil's Triangle. If everything can be known to you, how can I, Orgrim, still be a pirate?" Orgrim smiled very casually. As soon as he finished speaking, Morgans took a few more photos, and then said in a somewhat excited tone, "Please forgive me for being rude, Orgrim Lord Grim, this is really the scene, it's so unexpected. The pirate sitting on the throne of the void. This is probably the most valuable photo I can take in my life." Orgrim said with an evil smile on his lips. I hope I can see more handsome photos in the newspaper, so do you need me to cooperate with you in some actions? At the same time, in the Devil's Triangle, the Warring States General looked at the embarrassed Orgrim with a gloomy expression, and roared, "You are not Orgrim." Gee ha 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 ha, no, ha 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 ha, stupid Navy, did you just realize it now? Dai Peng laughed and mocked. At this time, she was in a very embarrassed state. Although she did not suffer any serious injuries, she was not Garp's opponent at all. At this time, she was surrounded by many high-level combat forces of the Navy. It could be said that she had no chance. There was no way to fight back. As soon as these words fell, Dai Peng also returned to her original appearance, with 9 tails swaying continuously behind her, proving her true identity. Katerina Dupont, I didn't expect it was really you. Were you deceived by Orgrim to die? How sad, Zhangguo said in a deep voice with a ruthless look in his eyes. To die? Dai Peng curled his lips and then said, no, I'm afraid you really want to kill me now, but aren't you curious about where my captain is? By the way, I surrendered. I can't defeat you anyway, so I'll just let you catch me for now. Sakaski had a murderous look on his face, and his arms instantly turned into lava. He stepped forward, as if he was going to beat Dai Peng to death directly. But at this moment, Warring States said in a deep voice, don't do it yet. Sakaski. Before Sakaski could ask anything, Warring States looked at Dai Peng and said, where is Orgrim? It's not something that needs to be concealed, my captain is in Marigio, and perhaps you will receive news soon. Dai Peng smiled evilly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 323. The top floor of the World Government Headquarters building. The 5 old stars were so angry that they smashed the table. Why is Orgrim in Marijoa? Didn't the Navy and CP agencies report his appearance in the Devil's Triangle? The bearded man roared. I just said, how could there be such a coincidence? Slave riot? It's that bastard Orgrim who's doing this, the bald king also roared in a deep voice. Does he think he can force us to give in when he comes to Marigio? Tell the Navy to kill Enelu directly. As soon as the words fell, a violent explosion suddenly came from the window outside. The bearded 5 old stars quickly walked to the window, looked over there, and said in horror, it's Pangal Castle. From the suppression of the slave riot just now, they only knew that Orgrim had hidden in the slave underground area of the automatic walkway and started a riot, but they did not know where Orgrim was now. And they immediately notified the residents of Gods, requesting that the security there be strengthened, and also sent Marigio's armed forces to reinforce. People from the CP agency were also dispatched. As for the news they just received, the residents of Gods, there were no accidents, and no Dracos were kidnapped. Therefore, the 5 old stars believed that Orgrim had not succeeded at this time, and they planned to execute Enelu directly, even if several Dracos would die afterwards. No hesitation. The result was good. Before the order was issued, Pangal Castle exploded. Looking at the circular shockwave that spread out, there was no need to guess anymore. There must be Orgrim there. That guy, why did he go to Pangal Castle? The bearded man asked angrily. Lord the bald king also exclaimed, but soon he calmed down and said, no, Lord is not in Marijoa. Although Lord is a world-class gangster who lives in seclusion behind the scenes, he hardly lives in Marijoa. Most of the time, he wanders around the world. Occasionally, only when major events happen or when the World Conference starts, only then would he return to Marijoa, sit high on the void throne, and overlook the world. Before the 5 old stars could think about anything, they looked over at Pangal Castle, and a shockwave suddenly erupted, hitting the building. Come here. But in mid-air, Several people wearing masks quickly blocked the shockwave and took action together to stop the shockwave from hitting the headquarters building of the world government. It's Orgrim. Only this bastard could be so arrogant. Crazy, Wu Laoxing cursed angrily. At this moment, the phone on the table rang again. As soon as he picked it up, the voice of the Warring States General came from inside. Lords of the Five Old Stars, Orgrim is not in the Devil's Triangle at all. He is most likely in Marijoa, the Warring States General said quickly to the phone bug. As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Laoxing cursed angrily. How does your navy do things? Do you still need to talk about this kind of thing? Orgrim almost demolished Marijoa. But as soon as the scolding ended, Wu Laoxing's face became a little ugly, because the Navy is not responsible for intelligence in this matter, so who should take the blame? Someone from the CP agency should take the blame. Didn't they swear that Orgrim was definitely on the Black Narwhal? At this moment, the bearded man suddenly thought of something and said, damn it, that guy's target may not be the Tianlong people. What? The bald king was stunned for a moment. Pongal Castle, Throne of the Void, the bearded man said in shock and anger. Here, too lazy to talk nonsense with warring states, the bald king hung up the phone, stood up directly, and walked out the door. The Void Throne belongs to the world government. One of the symbols and the most precious treasure of the world government. If Orgrim. This is simply unimaginable. More importantly, this Void Throne is Lord Im's throne. The Five Old Stars know very well how much Lord Im has a preference for the Void royal family. If they mess up this thing, then when Master Yumo comes back, it is probably time for the Five Old Stars to replace themselves, and they will die miserably. Under the protection of the CP agency masters of the brigade, the Five Old Stars quickly passed through the turbulent Marijoya and arrived at Pangal Castle. At this time, half of the Pangal Castle was blown into ruins. The Five Old Stars looked very gloomy. They walked through the ruins and walked towards the main hall where the Void Throne was. The entrance to the hall was destroyed by the impact, and a large hole and ruins appeared in everyone's sight. After passing through the ruins, the Five Old Stars finally saw a strong figure. But their faces were very pale. Where's the throne? Where is my Lord Im's throne? That's right, at this time, the place where the Void Throne was originally placed was empty. Orgrim was holding a saber in his hand, with his back to Wu Laoxing and others, and he was carving something on the wall. As for Neiman, the Sphinx, and the Birdman Morgans who came in, they had already disappeared. Hosgarot Orgrim arrives in person. Orgrim used the sword of 20 kings 800 years ago in his hand to carve a string of words on the wall. Orgrim, the bearded man looked at Orgrim angrily and shouted. After hearing this, Orgrim slowly turned around, with an evil smile on his face, and said, oh, yeah, it's still the same. What about the big shot, the supreme power of the world government? First time meeting, I am Hosgarot Orgrim. Why do you come to Marijoa to do these things? Where is the throne of the void? The bearded Five Old Stars asked eagerly. Why should I come to Marijoa? Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then said, didn't you invite me here? I even asked that guy from Moria to send me an invitation. Wu Laoxing's face darkened, and he said, don't mess around. Although Moria is the king of the Shichibukai, our world government can't control what he does. Don't transfer your conflicts to our world casually. As for the government, do you think we will make any compromises under your pressure? Wouldn't it? Orgrim asked with an evil smile. Before the Five Old Stars could speak, Orgrim smiled again and said, but are you really brave? You dare to appear in front of me in person, aren't you afraid that I might do something irrational in anger? The faces of the Five Old Stars froze, and they were full of hatred in their hearts. If you hadn't caused trouble in this Pangal Castle, even if you burned Marijoa on fire, we wouldn't have appeared. But the problem is, this involves the throne of the void and Lord Im. If we don't make some gesture now, wouldn't we be doomed? Moreover, the 5 old stars also believe that Orgrim should not break up with them here, otherwise it will really end badly. Gee ha 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 ha, you have nothing to say. It seems that there is something here that is important enough for you to risk your lives and show up in person. Orgrim smiled evilly again and said. Is it the throne that feels stiff and uncomfortable at all? I'm very curious, who is that seat for? Orgrim raised his eyebrows, looked at the 5 old stars and asked. The 5 old stars' faces darkened, took a deep breath, and said, Orgrim, return the void throne, and we will treat it as you have never been to Marijoya. That is something you cannot afford. Once something unexpected happens, just wait for our world government to go all out and start an all-out war with you. It was a treasure made by 20 kings 800 years ago. It symbolizes the equal rights and non-dictatorship concepts of our world government. You, a pirate, may not understand the meaning, but to all the participating countries, this is the supreme belief. Do you want to be the enemy of the world? Orgrim walked down the stairs for 2 steps, sat down on the steps, reached out and took out his ears, and said happily, isn't it more than that, someone should be sitting on that throne. As soon as Orgrim finished speaking, he glanced at the CP-0 masters around Wulaoxing, and said with a smile on his lips, do you need me to make it clearer? Or can we talk alone? Something about a certain adult. The expressions of the 5 old stars changed again. They were gloomy, heavy, and a little unbelievable. Lord Im's affairs are the secrets of the world government. Even the Admiral and the CP agency don't know about them. And the meaning of Rem's tone was obviously that he had understood something. You guys stand down. Wulaoxing's face darkened, and he ordered the CP-0 members around him. But, 5 adults, this is very dangerous, a person from the CP agency dissuaded me. Roll, Wulaoxing cursed angrily. If it weren't for you trash, saying that Orgrim was in the Devil's Triangle, what would happen? What's more, can you stop Orgrim here? After everyone in the CP agency retreated, Orgrim said with a smile, wise choice, you know very well that I will not kill you here. Wulaoxing, who was holding a sword in his hand, said in a deep voice, don't think that we are useless people. The reason why the 5 old stars dared to repel the CP-0 people was because they didn't want them to know too much, and they felt that they couldn't stop Orgrim. On the other hand, it was also because of the strength of the 5 of them. That's right, even if Orgrim wanted to take action, he couldn't take them all down at once. As long as there is a certain amount of resistance, time can be bought for the CP-0 people to return, and they can escape at any time. Want to give it a try? A shock wave condensed in Orgrim's hand, and then dissipated. The 5 old stars did not answer this question, and the bearded man asked in a deep voice, what do you know? What do you know? For example, your master, Lord Im? Orgrim smiled evilly. The expressions of the 5 old stars suddenly changed, and they said in a deep voice, what are you talking about? Forget it, it's not interesting. You won't admit it anyway, so just pretend that this person doesn't exist. Orgrim waved his hand and said. The 5 old stars will definitely not admit anything. After all, what if Orgrim made some recording? If the kings of the participating countries know the existence of Lord Im, what if they know after learning the true meaning of the throne of the void, would they be so angry? Where did you take the throne of the void? Wulaoxing asked in a deep voice, not entangled in the topic just now. As long as he knew that Orgrim did know some secrets, it was enough. I don't want to answer this question for the time being, because I'm not in a very good mood and need to see my little Enel. Otherwise, maybe I will smash the void throne. Orgrim waved his hand and said very naturally. That's between you and Mariah, and us, the 5 old stars still said stiffly. Before he could finish his words, Orgrim suddenly broke the sword in his hand. Wulaoxing's face twitched. Go ahead. That was the sword of 20 kings 800 years ago. You actually broke it for us? There are a lot of knives here, enough for me to pass the time. If you just want to fool me like this, I don't mind chatting with you for a while. As for the throne, I think I will send it to Avalon and make it an attraction, right? You are also welcome to visit when the time comes. For only 50 belly, you can go up, sit, and take photos. It's a good deal, right? Orgrim threw away the broken knife in his hand and said very calmly. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 324. Listening to Orgrim's words, the 5 old stars all fell silent. After a while, Orgrim spoke softly. You have been deceived by me. The navy has already shown up. In other words, I have all the evidence. You don't have to be tough. Speaking of which, as a pirate, I don't need to tell you evidence, but I am a very honest person. I believe that it won't be long before information about the Devil's Triangle Sea area will spread in the dark world. By then, I just slaughter a few participating countries. Do you think they will put pressure on you? The faces of the 5 old stars changed slightly. Orgrim has different deterrent effects on them if he has evidence or without evidence. You are a pirate, how can our world government compromise with you? Even if some of the participating countries have to sacrifice for this, the 5 old stars said again. It's true. Just like that, I can't convince you. Orgrim interrupted them directly. As long as you dare to take action against the franchised countries, Enelu will definitely die, Wu Lao Xing also said in a deep voice. That's why I came here in person to talk to you. Let's get back to the original topic. Don't you want the throne of the void? Orgrim smiled and asked. The 5 old stars' faces froze. Of course they want it. But they couldn't speak directly. Orgrim, do you really want to completely break up with me and start an all-out war? Do you think that with your Warhammer pirates, you can resist us? If we really attack the New World and Avalon at any cost, can you afford it? Wu Lao Xing scolded. Unable to bear it or stop it, perhaps the final result will be that the Warhammer pirates suffer heavy losses or even be completely destroyed. Orgrim said with a smile. As long as you understand, now return the throne of the void to us, and we will pretend that you have never been to Marijoa. Just settle the grudge between you and Moria yourself, Wu Lao Xing smiled and said. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Orgrim's face straightened and he said, but the problem is, I am willing to accept this price. How many years has I, Orgrim, been a pirate? As long as you can't kill me, it's just a matter of starting all over again. Are you really sure you can kill me completely? You, the 5 old stars want to say something. But Orgrim interrupted them directly and said, okay, don't have meaningless discussions here. I will appear here. This is my greatest sincerity. I am looking forward to your world. The government's navy will enter the New World and start an all-out war with us. However, I can't guarantee what the outcome will be when the time comes. Do you think the New World will be destroyed? What's the meaning? Wu Lao Xing's expression changed again and he asked. The end of the New World, Point, Orgrim said softly. Wu Lao Xing's eyes flashed with a look of shock. How could this guy know everything? That's just a legend. Do you really believe that just destroying 3 islands can destroy the entire New World? The 5 old stars said with serious faces. Whether it is a legend or not, whether it is true or false, you don't need me to popularize it for you, right? Or do you think I don't know which 3 islands they are? Is that why you feel confident? Then let me tell you something first, such as, Foz Island, Orgrim smiled evilly. If just now, the 5 old stars could still think that Orgrim was showing off, but now, there is no doubt that Orgrim really knows how to destroy New World. The New World has 3 terminal islands, connected to the magma lake on the bottom of the sea. Once these 3 islands are destroyed, the crust of the entire New World will change, and then the magma from the center of the earth will rush out of the sea. Destroy the entire New World. If Orgrim and Orgrim really start a full-scale war in the New World because of these things, and the Navy forces press in, Orgrim will do these things in anger. Things are coming. The 5 old stars don't know whether he will die. After all, there is a flying Shiji behind him, but the power of the Navy and the world government is almost finished. What do you want to do? Wu Laoxing asked angrily. I've made it very clear that I don't want any war or conflict to break out with your world government at this point in time. So, tell that idiot Moria to obediently give Enelu back to me, and then, the Navy will quickly withdraw from the Devil's Triangle for me. When the time comes, everything will be restored to its original state. You will continue to be your superior 5 old stars. I will continue to be a pirate in the New World. Don't disturb anyone. If there is another chance in the future, just let's have a war in an upright manner. I, Orgrim, am not someone who cannot afford to lose. When the time comes, I won't destroy any New World. Orgrim said with a smile. At this point, Orgrim paused for a moment and asked with some confusion, actually, I'm also very curious, why did you suddenly choose to attack me? There is no conflict between us, right? The 5 old stars looked at Orgrim with some toothache, and then said, you are a pirate. If there is a chance to attack you, do we need a reason? Is that so? Orgrim curled his lips and said. Then, Orgrim calculated the time and said, people with CP alone cannot defeat me. Mary Joa's defense strength is too weak. Is it because it's very close to the Navy headquarters, so you don't care? 2. But now the combat power of the Navy headquarters is not here. In terms of support, the Navy Marshal seems to be very difficult to deal with. I won't bother you here anymore. Just give me my answer. Do you want war or peace? To be honest, Marijoya's defensive power is really rubbish. Even when Fisher Tiger caused trouble here, it was not very good. He brought Marijoya down by himself. 5 old men, the stars, are also very depressed now. They don't want to agree to Orgrim's conditions at all, and they even want to kill Enel now to vent their anger. But Orgrim also made it very clear to them, if you dare to kill Enel Nero, don't even think about getting this void throne back. By the way, I will also massacre a few franchise countries to give you some revenge. When the time comes, you will have to deal with the pressure from each franchise country. If you want, let's start the war. Come on, I, Orgrim, am waiting for you in the New World. The worst is, we will die together, destroy the Warhammer pirates, and destroy the elite of the Navy headquarters. I, Orgrim, am still very young. I will spend another 20. It doesn't matter if you start all over again in 20 years. It depends on whether you can re-establish the power of the Navy in 20 years. The 5 old stars looked at each other, and finally the bearded man said, how can we believe your words? You can only trust me. Orgrim said softly. After a slight pause, Orgrim smiled evilly and said, what a coincidence. I, Orgrim, am a reputable person. If you want me to sign a letter, you can do it, we can definitely make a contract or something, I don't care at all. The mentality of the 5 old stars is about to collapse. Does it make sense to sign any agreement or contract with a bastard like you? In the Devil's Triangle, the Navy's fleet and the Warhammer Pirates' fleet are confronting each other. The strange thing is that no one on either side has any intention of opening fire, but the atmosphere is a bit tense. Daipeng and Enelu were imprisoned together. The Navy bosses were waiting for news about Marijoa and did not dare to act rashly. Not long after, the Warring States General answered the call from Marijoa. Let them go, let Enelu go, and that damn Katerina Dupont. The voice of the 5 old stars came from the phone bug. The Warring States General's expression changed and he said in a deep voice, 5 adults, although there is no Orgrim, we can severely damage the Warhammer pirates. Enough. Orgrim can also severely damage our world government, Wu Laoxing roared. I can't cure Orgrim, so I can't cure you Warring States? But after scolding warring states, Wulaoxing breathed a sigh of relief and said he robbed Pangal Castle. Throne of the Void, you should understand what this means. This, the warring states general was stunned for a moment, but a ruthless look quickly flashed in his eyes, and he dissuaded him, that's just a throne. Rebuild it? There are a lot of things that your navy doesn't know, and we don't need to explain so much to you. Sengoku, you just need to understand that this matter is not that simple. Our world government doesn't want this, but it has to be this way. That's enough. Let him go, Wulaoxing said softly. Although the words were soft, warring states had already understood the determination inside. After hanging up the phone, warring states turned around with a gloomy face, and the expressions of the other naval generals also, they all looked very angry. They all heard the voice on the phone clearly, and there was no need for Sengoku to explain anything. Sakazuki was the first to couldn't help but say, this is what we are called, release him. So what are we doing now? Useless effort. Yes, the Navy has gathered so many masters and many elite forces, and is preparing to start a head-on war with the Warhammer pirates here. Even the Warhammer pirates have entered this battlefield. But now, the world government, but I want to ask them to let people go and give up such a good opportunity. Our Navy has 50,000 troops, so many warships, going back and forth, eating people's food, and don't need money. The plans we made don't need any money. How to calculate this blow to morale? Warring states period, Garp called softly. Let him go, warring states sighed deeply and said with a tired expression. General, Sakazuki wanted to say something else. But Sengoku suddenly became furious. I said let him go, General, Sengoku roared angrily. His sudden outburst shocked all the senior generals of the Navy, and no one dared to say anything. Because it was already obvious that it was not General Sengoku who wanted to let people go. I'm so angry, but I have to compromise. Naval justice, Jun thought with a helpless look in his eyes. By now, she was increasingly doubting what the Navy's justice was. It's a great opportunity, but you can only watch the pirates leave calmly. Is the Navy a force of justice on the sea, or a watchdog in the hands of the world government? Jun didn't want to think too much about this question, but there was an answer that was flickering in his mind. Looking at a small boat, the figures of Eniro and Daipeng slowly approached the fleet. Beckman was also slightly relieved. The plan between Orgrim and him was actually a big gamble. Beckman was not sure whether it would succeed. But so far, Orgrim was still persuaded. World government. A war that could very well lead to changes in the world structure and even the destruction of the Warhammer pirates failed to break out. I am in a very bad state today, and my mind is blank. There are also discussions about the plot of the past 2 days in the comment area. The writing is indeed a bit unsatisfactory, which disappoints everyone. I will adjust the state as soon as possible and strive to restore the quality later. Thank you all book friends. In this case, you can still give me flowers and monthly tickets to support me anyway. I feel a little ashamed. I will cheer up and write well later. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 325. About to reach the deep sea of Fishman Island, Beckman had already arrived on the Black Narwhal. Originally, he still had some doubts about Stussy, but with the successful return of Enelu and Daipeng, this trace of doubt also disappeared. There may not be another opportunity like this in the future, an opportunity to destroy the Warhammer pirates in one fell swoop. This is not an opportunity that can be used as a bargaining chip for trust, and Stussy may not be able to have such great value in the future, so Beckman does not believe that this is a conspiracy of the world government. He already believed that Stussy was really put to bed by Orgrim. Well, it's over here, everything is going well, Orgrim. I don't know, he should have left Maragio, right? You can evacuate as well, I will notify Barrett later. Beckman said to the phone bug. Then, a cold voice came from the phone bug. Really, I see. Beckman hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Aren't you going back to Ava?" The phone bug was silent for a while, and then said, "Not for the time being. I have made great progress during this period." "Because of that red-haired boy," Beckman said with a smile on his lips. "You knew already?" Mihawk on the other side of the phone asked in surprise. "The few times you two fought against each other on the sea were considered big news, so of course we paid attention," Beckman joked with a smile. "I thought I was transparent," Mihawk smiled and said. Beckman's expression was a little awkward, but fortunately the phone bug couldn't tell anything. "No, the main reason is that everyone knows that you are obsessed with swordsmanship, so they don't want to disturb you unless there is such trouble as this time." Beckman casually found an excuse and said. Mihawk was silent for a moment, and a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. "Is that so? Let me just say, as a veteran of the Warhammer Pirates, how can a cotter be a transparent person? It turns out that everyone is accommodating me and don't want to disturb my progress in Kendo? That's right. This is a companion. Silently caring for myself. Oh, I miss myself. It's really inappropriate to get into trouble over this." Unable to bear to cheat Mihawk, a simple guy, Beckman suppressed the guilt in his heart, comforted Mihawk for a few words, and then hung up the phone. "You have to pay more attention to him in the future, otherwise you will always feel a little sorry for him," Beckman whispered softly. Mihawk and Barrett did not participate in this front line. On the contrary, one of them is now on Foz Island and the other on Second Island. These two islands are islands of destruction in the New World, connected to the magma lake under the deep sea. It can also be regarded as one of Orgrim's backup plans in Marijoya. If the world government is really stubborn, Orgrim is going to detonate one for them to cheer them up. But now it seems that this method was not used. The Void Throne is too important to the world government, or to the Five Old Stars. Then, Beckman contacted Barrett again. After confirming that there was nothing else going on with him, Barrett was ready to return to Avalon. After all, if something like this happens here, the war with the Big Mom pirates can no longer continue. If the war continues, I am afraid that both sides, who are holding fire in their hearts, may kill each other. At that time, if you are not careful, it will cause an all-out war, which is not what both sides want. After arranging everything that needed to be arranged, Beckman walked out of the cabin and walked towards the medical room. As soon as I opened the door of the medical room, I saw Nightingale giving an injection to Anilu's arm. "Where is Daipeng?" Beckman scanned and found that there was no sign of Daipeng, so he asked curiously. "Daipeng?" The guy was strong and a user with animal-type fantasy beast ability. He surrendered quickly and had no serious injuries. After staying for 2 days, he was already able to move around freely. "He just left." Nightingale smiled and said. Beckman nodded, not surprised at all. He looked at Anilu and said, "How is this kid doing?" "Just barely, but fortunately it didn't leave any hidden injuries or anything like that, but he was very weak and needed to rest for a while." Nightingale took the needle out of Anilu's arm, reached out and patted Anilu's head and said. Anilu smiled awkwardly, although he was much more powerful than Nightingale. But he didn't dare to resist in the face of this kind of caressing. After all, he was a senior, and he was not like Mr. Chui, who would heal himself in 2 days. As a pirate, how could he offend me? "Doctor." "Mr. Beckman," Anilu glanced at Beckman with some embarrassment and said. Beckman nodded at him and then asked, "Really, we don't need to deal with Moria? I think from now on, neither the Navy nor the world government will pay attention to him in a short time. Even if we beat him to death, no one will complain to him. Now that the plans of the world government and the Navy have been shattered, Moria seems irrelevant. Especially since he is still a pirate, even if he is the king of the Shishibukai, the world government and the Navy must be in a bad mood now. How can they care about him? Maybe even looking forward to the Warhammer pirates killing Moria." After listening to Beckman's words, Anilu shook his head without hesitation and said, "No, I want to keep him. Beckman laughed when he heard this, and Annalou said a little embarrassedly, although I seem a bit willful when I say this, it was my mistake after all, but Moria seized the opportunity and even turned the situation into what it is now. So, but, I still hope that Moria can be left to me to deal with. Beckman stepped forward, reached out, and rubbed Annalou's head, and said with a smile, don't blame yourself too much. Everyone will have failures and mistakes. You are like this, so am I, and even Og. It's not like Rem has never failed. The key is that after failure, you still have to have the courage to stand up and start over. This is the truly precious thing, Moria, although that guy is very annoying and I want to kill him right now, in the final analysis, he is not on the same level as us. It is very easy to kill him, but since he can be your motivation, then, I'll leave this matter to you. Yes, Mr. Beckman, when I recover from my injuries and when there is a suitable opportunity, I must let that bastard Moria understand what will happen if he provokes our Warhammer pirates. A fierce look flashed in Annalou's eyes, and he said in a deep voice. Well, work hard. Beckman patted Annalou on the shoulder and said. Then the two chatted for a few more words before Beckman left the place unsteadily. Annalou was silent for a while, then looked at Dr. Nightingale and asked, said Boss Doctor. Call me Dr. Nightingale. Nightingale reached out and knocked on Annalou's head again. What's wrong? After Nightingale finished knocking, she turned around and arranged something on the apothecary table. This time, it's actually very dangerous, right? Although in the end, it seemed like we had lost nothing, I've caused a lot of trouble to everyone, right? I heard that Lord Orgrim went to Marajoa himself, Annalou said with some self-blame in his eyes. When he went to sea, he was high-spirited and wanted to bring glory and pride to Orgrim. As a result, in just about a year, the Warhammer pirates were almost destroyed, although Enel didn't show anything. But in fact, he felt very guilty and self-blame. Nightingale listened to Aniro's inquiry and paused for a moment while arranging the potions in her hands, and then started to mix them skillfully again. How can it be? What trouble can Amir Moria bring to our Warhammer pirates? Navy headquarters? World government? Is there not enough bad blood between us and them? Isn't this kind of thing beyond our expectations? We didn't look at all the plans and everything was in order. Isn't everything under our control? Nightingale said softly. In his words, it was as if this time it was not a big deal at all. He understated all the dangers in it, leaving only some confident details. Enel listened. Hearing Nightingale's words, his expression was a little excited, as if he wanted to say something. He was not stupid, of course he knew that Nightingale was comforting him. Daipen risked his life, and Orgrim took Sven with him. Kes and Niemann appeared in Marajo, and almost all the high-level combat forces of the Navy headquarters arrived in the Devil's Triangle. Isn't this dangerous and a major event? But at this time, he didn't know what to say. His lips trembled slightly. After a while, Annalou said with a choked tone, Boss Doctor, I, still eligible to return to Avalon, still qualified, see Boss Orgrim. Nightingale sighed slightly after hearing this, turned around, hit Annalou on the head again, and said, Call me Dr. Nightingale. Then, without waiting for Annalou to speak, Nightingale said softly, Annalou, you are still a little guy. Little guys are qualified to make mistakes. As long as you remember the lesson of this time, you will be able to do things in the future. Think about it more and don't be so impulsive. As for whether you are qualified to return to Avalon and meet the captain. At this point, Nightingale's tone became gentler and she said softly, Annalou, this qualification does not lie in what others give you, but in yourself. As long as you still want to go back to Avalon and want to see each other, Orgrim, you are qualified, be it me, Beckman, or Orgrim, everyone in the Warhammer Pirates would risk their lives for you, but no one would blame you for it, just like, you also risked your life for us. Although you didn't say it, I know that you went on a hunger strike, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be so weak. You want to use your own death to prevent those things from happening. We all have the same feelings. This is companionship, Enel. Boat, Dr. Nightingale. Enilu's eyes were filled with tears, his voice was choked up, and his nose was about to flow into his mouth. Stop crying here, otherwise there will be strange rumors. For example, are you afraid of injections? As Beckman said, failure is nothing to be ashamed of. Just find a way to get up. I really hope that there will be a place for you in the future. Nightingale said with a smile. I will. One day, I will stand on the sea, become a member of the Warhammer Pirates, become Lord Orgrim, and become your pride. Enilu wiped the tears from his eyes and said firmly. Then, he smiled again and said, but this road must be very dangerous. I might have to trouble you, Dr. Nightingale. Many times. Ah ha 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 ha, Nightingale smiled, then picked up his oolong tea from the table nearby, took a sip and said, no problem, as long as you don't die on the battlefield, I will never let you die on the operating table. Come on, this is my promise to you, Enilu. Enilu looked at the cup in Nightingale's hand with a strange expression, hesitated for a moment, and then asked Boss Doctor, what are you doing? This is for drinking. Call me Dr. Nightingale. Nightingale stretched out her hand and knocked Enilu's head again. Then, he took another sip of the oolong tea happily, and then said, oolong tea, my specialty, has water of life added in it, which is good for the human body. Health, how is it? Want to try a drink? Smelling the strong smell of alcohol, Enilu's face twitched slightly and he said, no, it's okay, I'm still a patient. I'm not afraid of any doctor. What are you afraid of? Nightingale curled her lips and said. Enilu looked at Nightingale's gulp of tea gesture, and secretly decided in his heart that it is best not to get injured casually in the future, otherwise if you are unlucky, you will really be unable to do it. It's the operating table. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 326. In the gateway waters of the New World, there is an ordinary ship without any flags. Orgrim was sitting generously on the deck, basking in the sun. After all, basking in the sun is a relatively rare thing for the people of Avalon. As long as they don't leave Avalon, they can't do it even once a year. So if you have the opportunity, you must cherish it. Orgrim was holding a newspaper in his hand and was reading the news on it with great interest. Big news, the birdman Morgans was in Marijoya for some reason at the time, and discovered him immediately and took several photos of himself on the Void Throne. Not to mention, this guy's photography skills, it was indeed very good, and Orgrim was quite satisfied with it. However, Orgrim also made some agreements with him, that is, he could not publish these photos until everything came to an end and the Warhammer pirates returned to normal. Morgans did not dare to offend a ruthless man like Orgrim. Look, the world government offended him, what's the result? The Void Throne, which symbolizes the core concept, has been moved away by this crazy guy. If it were me, if I offended him and was accidentally caught by him, wouldn't it be like having my chicken feathers plucked out and roasted? Roast chicken? So Morgans immediately agreed to Orgrim's request, took the photo, and left with satisfaction. Therefore, today, the news published in newspapers is news that has been castrated by the world government. There was no mention of the actions of the Navy headquarters, nor anything about the Devil's Triangle. There is only a small chapter describing the friction between the Warhammer pirates and Moria. It seems that as soon as the Warhammer pirates arrived in the Devil's Triangle, Moria escaped and Enel was also rescued. Many big guys in the New World are confused. Where is the agreed upon conspiracy? What about the promised war? Why is this gone? Anticlimactic. But when they noticed the public riots in Marijoya mentioned in the main article of the news, they seemed to have noticed something. If nothing else, it should be that the Warhammer pirates had reached something with the world government here. After a dirty agreement, the two parties finally broke up peacefully. That's right, this small-scale slave riot turned into a riot incident among ordinary people in the newspapers, and they even deliberately blamed the Revolutionary Army. Orgrim can understand this. On the one hand, the world government has explicitly banned the slave business, and it is even less likely to admit that Marijoa has slaves. So according to the official argument, this time it was just ordinary people living in Marijoa who were causing trouble. On the other hand, Marijoa is the core area of the world government. Of course, it is impossible to just casually publish the fact that the pirate Orgrim visited here in the newspaper. Ha ha ha, it's an interesting report, but when everything calms down, if Morgan's Birdman publishes a photo of me sitting on the Void Throne in the newspaper, I don't know how this kind of slap in the face will make people. How violent is the world government, Orgrim murmured softly. But this has nothing to do with him. If you want to find trouble, go to the news of the world. Go to that Birdman Morgan's. It's in Orgrim. When Mew looked at the newspaper in his hand, Neiman smiled and took the phone bug, walked over and said, "Brother, second brother, and the others have arrived at Fishman Island, and there is no danger at all." Orgrim said with a smile on his lips, "Really, did those guys from Woolaoxing call us today?" Not to mention, Orgrim's trip to Marijoa was not without gains. For example, he established direct contact with the 5 old stars, and the two parties exchanged phone calls. If there is anything needed in the future, Orgrim can directly contact the 5 of them, discuss business, cooperate, etc. It is not impossible. However, these days, the 5 old stars have a phone call every day, not for other reasons, but for the missing Void Throne requires Orgrim to return it as soon as possible. No, Neiman shook her head and said. Ha ha ha, Orgrim smiled, and then said, "Contact Gangplank." Neiman nodded, and then quickly dialed the phone number. At the same time, in an ordinary residence in Marijoa, Plank was sitting in the living room. And under his butt, sitting is the Void Throne that the 5 old stars dream of. Yes, Gangplank and Orgrim were all in Marijoa before, but Orgrim was disguised as slaves. As for Plank, he used his own abilities to infiltrate the world government. The reason why the Void Throne was able to disappear from everyone's sight was because it was moved away by Plank's ability. After that, he hid in Marijoa's residence, which was also one of the intelligence points of the Warhammer pirates. After the slave riots, Marijoa's garrison troops searched here many times, but because of Gangplank's ability, it is difficult for ordinary people to find anything, so he has not been exposed so far. The 5 old stars thought that Orgrim had already brought the throne of the Void out of Marijoa, but they never thought that this thing was actually still in the Holy Land. "Mr. Hammer," Plank answered the phone and responded with a smile. "You can leave Marijoa and leave that lousy chair there," Orgrim said with a smile. "This is the throne of the Void, it's very valuable. Master Chui really doesn't intend to blackmail those 5 people again." Glank touched the armrest on the throne and said with some emotion. "Jahahaha, don't continue to irritate those 5 old guys. This time I also let them understand that I, Orgrim, keep my word. Maybe in the future, are there any opportunities for complicity?" Orgrim said with an evil smile. "I do think they are eager to kill us, and are they complicit in it?" Plank also responded with a smile. "It's different. If it's the Navy, if it's the Warring States period, or people like Garp, they naturally don't have this opportunity, but the 5 old stars are different, and the world government is different. We can't get along now just because the interests between us are not enough. We will wait until enough interests appear. It's hard to say," Orgrim said very casually. After chatting for a few words, Orgrim hung up the phone. There was no need to worry about whether Gangplank could leave Marijoa. With his ability and wit, It didn't matter. Question. In the headquarters building of the world government, the 5 old stars are busy with some things, such as rebuilding Pongal Castle. The news about Pongal Castle has been blocked, and the news is now circulating in the market. There was a small-scale riot in Marijoya, and no losses were suffered. As long as Pongal Castle is rebuilt as soon as possible and the Void Throne is recovered, all of this can be covered up. The faces of the 5 people are not very good looking. While he was busy, he would occasionally look at the phone bug on the table, as if he was expecting something. At this moment, the phone bug suddenly rang. The bearded man glanced at it and whispered, "That's the one, damn bastard." Then, he directly answered the phone and said, "Orgrim, is it almost time? How long are you going to put it off? We have already done what we promised you, it's time for you to fulfill your promise." Gee, ha 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 ha, you are really impatient. Don't worry, I will satisfy you today. After all, I, Orgrim, am a pirate who keeps his word, Orgrim said with an evil smile. The bearded man breathed a sigh of relief, and then said, "Where is the throne of the void? I think there is a good chance that the thieves and gangsters who stole the Void Throne are lurking in Marijoa's residence. Maybe if you search carefully, you will find a surprise in a certain residence." Orgrim raised his eyebrows and said with a smile. The bearded man suddenly covered the phone bug, and then another 5 old stars pressed a button on the table, and then said in a deep voice, "Go and check it out, all the houses on Marijoya. Find that thing." "Yes." After the communication device hung up, the bearded man continued, "I hope you didn't do any tricks, Orgrim. If there is any problem here, we will still need you even if we risk the destruction of the new world." "Nice." Oh, how cruel. "Are you threatening me?" As he spoke, Orgrim said in a cold voice. Wolausing's expression changed slightly, and then he said, "No, this is just a kind reminder. Jahahaha, let me just say, we are good friends who hit it off immediately, how could we be threatened?" Orgrim laughed and said. "The 5 old stars are eager to kill this bastard now. What are our identities? You, Orgrim, are a pirate, and you are worthy of being friends with us?" Listen to the phone bug over there breathing slightly hurriedly. Orgrim did not continue to provoke the 5 old stars. Instead, he straightened his tone and said, "I have already put the things there. This time, I will settle the account. I hope we can get along more peacefully in the future, otherwise no one will look good, right?" The bearded palm tightened slightly, and then he took a deep breath and said, "Orgrim, I have to admit that although you are a damned and lowly pirate, you are indeed a very capable guy. If it weren't for the grudges between us, I really hope you can become King Shishibukai. Gee, ha 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 ha, it's not enough. A mere king under the Kaiwahei is not enough to impress me. When you have interests that are more convincing to me and can be traded, let's talk about these things again. As long as the interests are big enough. I can do anything." Orgrim laughed and said. After a slight pause, Orgrim smiled evilly and said, "Of course, maybe I will take the initiative to cooperate with you in the future, but I am not sure. I have always been very sincere and will definitely provide enough benefits when the time comes. Our world government will not cooperate with pirates like you," the bearded man said without hesitation. Orgrim smiled and didn't care about such words. "What you said is beautiful. Do you have the guts not to buy arms from me?" "Yeah? That's really a pity," Orgrim said very nonchalantly, and then, without waiting for the 5 old stars to speak, he continued, "By the way, I forgot to tell you some news before. I have a new member of the Warhammer Pirates, and it's you." "Acquaintance?" Doflamingo, the bearded man immediately thought of this guy. However, before he could ask, Orgrim said softly, "Queen of Happy Street Stussy, ha ha ha, let's continue chatting when we have time, bye." As soon as he finished speaking, he hung up the phone bug, and the 5 old stars stared at the phone bug with their eyes flashing with anger. The bald king even cursed in a deep voice, "Damn CP-0. So that's it, all the problems lie in this place. How they do things. At this moment, the people below also reported that they had found the void throne in a civilian residence. This made the furious mood of the 5 old stars a little calmer. Call, it seems that bastard Orgrim has no intention of falling out with me, the bald king said in a deep voice. A pirate who keeps his word, haha, ridiculous, the bearded man sneered. After finding the void throne, he originally wanted to completely delete Orgrim's phone bug signal wave and prohibit access. But in the end he hesitated and decided not to take action. As Orgrim said, if there is something really profitable in the future, it is not impossible for both parties to temporarily cooperate or join forces. Just as Orgrim needs someone to communicate directly with the 5 old stars like the channels, the 5 old stars also need a channel that can directly communicate with big pirates like Orgrim. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 327. Since Beckman and others seemed to have stayed in Fishman Island for some time for some reason, they received warm hospitality from Ryago Castle on Fishman Island. So Orgrim returned to Avalon first. In the Avalon station, Orgrim was talking to Shiji, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Although Shiji didn't look old at this time. But the momentum on his body has indeed disappeared a lot. He was wearing loose gold Wano-style clothes, with 2 swords hanging on his waist, the rudder stuck on his head, smoking a cigar, and sitting in the courtyard with a carefree look. Orgrim's eyes were somewhat envious, and he suddenly felt that Shiji was living more and more enjoyable if he temporarily retired like this. Boss Shiji, we are in trouble this time, Orgrim said softly with some emotion. He originally didn't plan to trouble Shiji to come forward. In fact, if Shiji came forward, many things here would be easily solved. But after all, he had talked grandly with Shiji at the beginning, and Shiji was indeed living in seclusion quietly. Go down. Whenever he encountered any trouble, he would go to the elders in his family, which seemed a bit incompetent, so Orgrim did not go in the end. Unexpectedly, Shiji came anyway. He didn't do anything else. He just entered Avalon with a high profile and protected Orgrim's lair. Just because Kaido had restrained the Big Mom pirates, Shiki, the legendary boss, came to Avalon to take charge. Therefore, while Orgrim and others went out to do business, everything was calm in Avalon and nothing happened. Of waves. Shiji listened to Orgrim's words, slowly exhaled a puff of smoke and said, "What's the trouble? I'm just here to see you, and you happen to not be at home." Orgrim grinned and said with a smile, "It's true, what I said seems a bit harsh, who of us is following who?" Shiji was stunned when he heard this, and then glared at Orgrim. Grim glanced at him and said, "Not to mention anything else, you just have this face. You are much better than before. Gee ha 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 ha, a must for the strong." Orgrim laughed and said. After chatting for a few more words, Shiji said, "I haven't thanked you yet. I still give Indigo so much financial support every year. Without these, my plan is really not going to work." Orgrim waved his hand and said, "If one family doesn't talk about 2 families, let's not talk about it anymore." At this moment, Neiman and Sphinx were holding dinner plates in their hands, which contained some of Shiki's favorite foods, and walked over with a smile. When they saw these 2 guys, Shiki was originally his face, which was still a bit stern, suddenly became gentle. "Neiman, Sphinx, come on, come on." Shiji waved to them enthusiastically. "Admiral," Neiman called excitedly. Sphinx also shouted happily, "Boss Shiji, you are finally here. If you don't come, Neiman and I will go to Melview to find you." Shiji has always taken care of Neiman as his own daughter, and Sphinx can be said to have been raised by him since he was a child, and she is even more loyal to him. When he sees these 2 little girls, Shiji can't stand it. He couldn't help but laugh. The 2 little girls gathered around Shiji and chatted non-stop, as if they had endless things to say. Shiji was not as impatient as when he was talking to Orgrim. No matter what the big or small thing was, he always smiled and laughed. He was listening, as if he cared about these things. Orgrim's face twitched slightly, thinking to himself, "Am I not your precious apprentice?" However, seeing the three people looking like a happy family, Orgrim couldn't help but smile, stood up, and walked out of the courtyard slowly. Beckman was away, and Avalon had a lot of backlogged work during this period. Orgrim felt that as the captain, he should play some role at this time. So he came to the office hall and started to deal with these things. The result was good. In the past, he could still understand the above things and make arrangements according to his own ideas. But now, he can hardly understand the various arrangements above. He can only know the specific context and that he is moving forward according to the direction he has set. He almost didn't know the person in charge of each of these matters, big or small. They were probably all new cotters of Avalon, right? Holding a pen in his hand, he wanted to sign a document, but in the end, he still failed to sign it. "Forget it, it's better not to cause trouble for Beckman," Orgrim whispered softly. Although he did not continue to sign, he seriously picked up these documents and read them bit by bit. This sudden discovery also made Orgrim realize his own shortcomings. Although as a captain, he did not need to worry about these things so much, he only needed to explain the direction. But this situation occasionally happens, so Orgrim believes that even if he doesn't care, he should know something about it. When Beckman goes out again in the future, he can handle the things here steadily. By constantly reading these documents, Orgrim also learned many details about Avalon and met many new cotters. For example, the current permanent population of Avalon is 13.76 million. Except for the fact that there is no so-called order and law on the island of Avalon, the 4 surrounding islands have returned to normal systems. Starting from the senior cotters, a large number of new nobles and mid-level cotters have been promoted to help Avalon control these areas. The combat effectiveness of these people is almost not very good, but their administrative ability is very good. What the people on these 4 islands have to do is to provide Avalon with the productivity and sufficient population. On the island of Avalon, the floating population is very complicated. It is still the same as before, there is no order at all, and all kinds of bloodshed happen every day, but there is only one more Warhammer Pirates rules. As long as those who come to Avalon don't touch the red line of the Warhammer Pirates, no one will care about the rest. As Avalon's deep-sea free trade zone gradually became prosperous, businessmen from all over the world began to risk their heads and come to Avalon in a steady stream. Then, they will come into contact with a level here that they could not, or it was difficult to come into contact with before, such as the Dark World. These merchants who dare to come to Avalon to do business are all brave and careful people. In the past, they had no qualifications or channels to get into the business of the Dark World. But in Avalon, they found this channel, and after discovering that the interests of the Dark World were also very huge, they naturally had to participate, such as arms smuggling, psychotropic agents, and even organ trading. They dared to do so. The source of their ability to participate in this business is in Avalon. In addition, if they want to make money in the Dark World without being hacked, they must have certain strength to support them. Therefore, last year, these businessmen began to hand over part of their profits to Avalon at a fixed time and seek Avalon's asylum. Beckman therefore waved his hand and enveloped them in the name of Avalon. So far, Black, there is a new group in the world, and that is the Avalon Business Group. Currently, this business group is not very powerful, but it can be seen that they are expanding very quickly. Doflamingo became the boss of the business group here, in other words, the chairman of the company. The Don Quixote family has the largest number of shares in this business group. It can be said that he has identified Orgrim's thigh, and he can't let go, and he is still tying up interests continuously. Let both parties maintain a consistent direction in terms of feelings and interests. The development of commerce has promoted the circulation of various materials. Avalon's gradual prosperity has not only attracted merchants, but also attracted various forces in the dark world to increase their resources. Next, there are pirates from all over the world. After entering the New World, most pirates will choose to visit the dock. Currently, there are 4 largest docks in the New World, namely Orgrim, Kaido, Whitebeard, and Charlotte Lingling. Avalon is a very unique place here, attracting countless pirates to visit the dock. Among them, those with potential will be directly selected to join the various independent fleets under the Warhammer Pirates. Usually when nothing happens, they can run around, but when something happens, they will be summoned. At present, most of the patrol fleets in the Evernight Sea are composed of these independent pirate groups, and they are getting along like a fish in water here. And those pirates who are not ready to join the Warhammer Pirates, or are not qualified to join the Warhammer Pirates, can still enjoy a wonderful pirate life in Avalon. Here, there are 3 elements that need to be ensured. First, you have enough strength to avoid being killed in the street. Second, you have enough money to squander here. Third, don't touch the red line of the Warhammer Pirates. As long as these 3 elements are ensured, this is indeed a rare super pirate paradise in the New World. Specialties and supplies from almost all over the world can be replenished in Avalon. Even as more and more pirates gather in Avalon here, a recruitment base similar to a talent market has also been formed. For example, if my captain is beaten to death in the street in Avalon, my younger brother can turn around and find a new owner here. Anyway, it is very lively. Generally speaking, based on business and the dark world, Avalon's various areas of involvement have almost all been revitalized and are thriving. With the continuous increase and influx of population, the development of the island has not stopped yet. Even with the influx of a large number of strong men from Fishman Island, the demand for labor is still in short supply. The entire Avalon is in this state of prosperity and development. After looking at it, Orgrim discovered the hidden problem here, that is, Avalon's conventional power was unprofessional and small in number. Now that the reputation of the Warhammer Pirates is shrouded in the air, no problems can be seen in the short term. But in the future, a professional military group will indeed be needed to help the Warhammer Pirates rule the tens of millions of people and the growing floating population. Isn't that bastard Barrett back yet? The matter with this pirate army is becoming more and more urgent, Orgrim whispered softly. Then, Orgrim looked at the chart of Avalon, and then glanced at the 5 islands including Avalon. He thought for a while and said the next step is to make these islands, the 5 islands must be completely connected into one. Then, his sight gradually covered the entire Evernight Sea. There were many islands in the sea that was always in darkness. There will be more or less populations and countries on these islands. Currently, since the largest force in the Evernight Sea is the Warhammer Pirates, these countries in the Evernight Sea have already begun to pay protection fees and hang Warhammers. The flag of the pirate group. But this is not enough. They are still loose. Orgrim needs to unite this entire sea area in the future. It also requires a large number of ships, precise routes, and even, sea train. Gee, I wonder how Master Tom's research on the sea train is going? Do you want Vincent to make another capital injection? Orgrim smacked his lips and said. After finishing these things, Orgrim looked at the phone bug on the table again, and was thinking in his heart, should he contact Kaido and say thank you? After all, this guy, the enthusiastic boss, really helped me. But if I contacted him, I was afraid that this guy would drag me and talk endlessly. In the end, Orgrim smiled bitterly and thought it would be better to thank him. Then I would be too rude. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 328. Dear brother, are you really not coming? Brother, I have prepared a lot of good things for you. The Odin I told you about last time, I am also going to take care of him this time. Why don't you come and take a look? Kaido said blah 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 over the phone. Orgrim twitched the corner of his mouth a little, and quickly said no, Boss Kaido, I understand your kindness, but you also know that the thing in my hand there are still many things to do. This time it passed without any danger, but I can't be too relaxed. Next time. Kaido invited several more times, but Orgrim still politely rejected him. Finally, Kaido said helplessly, okay, but after I finish handling the affairs in Wano country, I have a lot of time now. Then I have to go to your Avalon and have a good time. I heard that your place is now the largest pirate paradise in the New World. Orgrim panicked. He really didn't want to see Kaido again. If it were an enemy, it would be easy to say that at worst the two sides would just find a place to fight and it would be over. But Kaido's character is simply his nemesis. He didn't look for trouble for you at all, and he was so enthusiastic that Orgrim had no place to get angry even if he wanted to. But he couldn't refuse Kaido because of this. After all, Kaido was so sincere, and Orgrim was too embarrassed to refuse him. In desperation, Orgrim could only pretend to be enthusiastic and said, really? That's great. Boss Kaido, you must inform me before you come. I have to make more preparations, I can't neglect you. Ha 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 ha, how can we be so polite between two brothers? Kaido said happily. How can you say that? This is not a polite thing, it is sincerity, Orgrim said quickly. Then, the two chatted for a few more words. In Kaido's reluctant words, Orgrim hardened his heart and hung up the phone. If Kaido really greets me in advance, I will find a way to do something, leave Avalon and let Beckman entertain Kaido on my behalf, Orgrim decided secretly in his heart. However, after making this decision, Orgrim felt a little ashamed. What's going on? It's like I'm sorry for Kaido. For a moment, Orgrim seemed to think of the licking dog and the goddess, as well as Shiki and Roger. Huh. This seems a bit similar. Could it be that Kaido is my licking dog? Thinking of this, Orgrim shuddered all over. He seemed to understand why Roger always rejected Shiji. I'm afraid it's not just the two who have different personalities and ideas, right? Roger is also afraid that Shiji will cling to him every day, blah 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 blah, right? In Holy Land Marijoya, the warring States General and Cyborg Marshal are heading to the headquarters building of the world government to meet the 5 old stars. But this time, both warring states and Marshal Cyborg felt a little guilty. Their navy planned a conspiracy against the Warhammer pirates, but in the end, everything was in vain and the plan completely failed. According to past examples, the world government and the 5 old stars will definitely not take this blame. Then who will carry it? It is customary for the navy to carry it. So warring states and Cyborg felt that this time they were here to be scolded and take the blame. Walking into the headquarters building, officials from various world governments came and went, seemingly very busy. Seeing this, Marshal Cyborg put on a slightly mocking smile and said, haha, it's such a rare scene. When they came here in the past, the officials seemed to be at ease, but now they are working hard. It can also be seen from this that the 5 adults are in a very bad mood now, warring stateside. The worse the mentality of those 5 bosses, the more uncomfortable it will be for their navy. And these officials also used to like to fish, but in the past few days, Wulaoxing has killed several people with cruel hands. They were so frightened that they had to work with all their strength, for fear of being pulled out by the 5 old stars to sacrifice the flag. For a time, the efficiency of the world government has improved a lot. As soon as he walked into the lobby, he saw the elevator door open, and then a man who looked very tall and strong, but with a very dark and obscure aura walked out of it. After seeing Sengoku and Cyborg, the man's expression became more gloomy, but he still said hello Cyborg, long time no see. Ha ha ha, Mia, it's been a while since I last saw you, Marshal Cyborg said with a smile. This man named Mia had no intention of saying hello to Warring States. It seemed that Warring States was not worthy of talking to him. Listening to Cyborg's response, Mia couldn't help but smile. He twitched the corner of his mouth, and then said directly, "I have other things to be busy with, so I'll take my leave." After that, he walked directly past Sengoku without even looking at Sengoku. After the man named Mia left, Sengoku said, "Although our navy didn't deal with him in the past, what happened? I always feel that the commander-in-chief of CP-0 today seems to be more, what if it's not disguised?" "Yes, this Mia is the commander-in-chief of CP-0. I am afraid that no one except Wulaoxing knows his real name. This feminine code name seems to have become his identity, but it has never been. People dare to laugh at him because of this, because those who laughed at him are all dead. On the contrary, precisely because of his feminine code name, it adds a lot of mystery to his identity. Even many CP-0 the members all thought their ultimate boss was a mysterious woman. Who knows, maybe it's because of my period," Cyborg said with unabashed ridicule. "It can be seen that his relationship with this Mia is very bad. But it must be because I was taught a lesson by those 5 adults, it's really uncomfortable. Even my own son's CP agency has been taken down. Wouldn't it be even worse for us godsons in the Navy?" General Zhangguo muttered with a wry smile. The two got in the elevator and quickly arrived at the top floor. When they arrived at Wulaoxing's office door, Zhangguo shook his head helplessly, then gritted his teeth and knocked on the door. "Come in." Wulaoxing's voice came from inside. General Warring States glanced at Marshal Steelbone, then opened the door, and the two of them stepped in. Warring States closed the door very carefully, then turned around, ready to accept the violent storm coming from the 5 old stars. When I turned around, I found that the expressions of the 5 old stars did not seem to be very angry or gloomy, and they even had smiles on their faces. What does this mean? Prepare to call us have a good meal before going on the road? If you count the time, did you meet Mia just now? The bearded man smiled, looked at Marshal Cyborg and asked. Cyborg nodded quickly and said, "That's right." The Warring States general thought in his mind that that guy was indeed scolded here. "I have said before that the position of Commander-in-Chief is reserved for you, Cyborg, but I have not told Mia these things before. We have told him just now not to have any petty thoughts on this kind of thing." The Bald King smiled and said. Marshal Cyborg's expression was a little stunned, and the Warring States general also looked very strange. What's going on? Shouldn't it be our navy that takes the blame? Why does it seem like something different than what I imagined? He even directly eliminated the biggest opponent of the Marshal in the competition for the Commander-in-Chief? "Thank you to the 5 adults for taking care of me." Marshal Cyborg smiled and said. "If you are not capable, we will not take care of you. That bastard Mia has been the leader for so many years in vain, and he can't even control the people under him," the bearded man snorted coldly. It was obvious that they were very dissatisfied with CP-0 now. Both Cyborg and Warring States had a trace of doubt on their expressions. What is going on? Upon seeing this, the Bald King opened his mouth to explain. Said, "We have investigated everything about the Warhammer pirates before. Although the entire plan failed, we also know that this is not your navy's problem. On the contrary, your navy did very well, but it was just a little bit unlucky. That's all." Warring States was even more surprised at this time. "What's going on?" "Cyborg, why did you say this plan failed?" the bearded man suddenly asked. Marshal Cyborg was also a little confused. He didn't know what these 5 big guys meant. Didn't he just say that it's not a problem with our navy, but a problem of luck? Don't you have all the answers? It's just that we are unlucky? But Cyborg was silent for a while, and then said, "It's because the enemy is too cunning, and our navy's thinking is not flexible enough and a little rigid, which leads to this. Actually, he wanted to because the people in CP-0 are so retarded that they swore to tell us that Husgaro's Orgrim is in the Devil's Triangle. Although the Warring States period later did many actual tests before finally confirming this matter, it has to be said that subjectively, CP-0 gave their navy a great influence and illusion. At the same time, their intelligence was also very wrong. But in the end, I felt that it was better not to pass the blame. After all, the 5 bosses seemed to be in a good mood this time. If I were to shirk something, it would be. The bearded man looked at Cyborg with satisfaction and said, "Sure enough, you are more responsible. Compared with you, that bastard Mia." Having said this, the bearded man shook his head, feeling a little dissatisfied. Mia, that guy, didn't realize that Stussy had rebelled before he came. The 5 old stars asked the same question, but he turned the blame on the Navy in one fell swoop. This made the 5 old stars have a much lower impression of him, and they felt that this person was unable to take on greater responsibilities and was not suitable to be the future commander-in-chief of the army. On the other hand, Cyborg, this guy consciously shouldered the blame. This is a sign of responsibility. Of course, the 5 old stars prefer subordinates who take the initiative to take the blame. If we really count this incident, their 5 old stars also made a lot of mistakes, especially on Marijoa's side. It's simply a disgrace. But as the highest authority in the world government, as the highest ranking celestial dragons, they are the apparent bosses. Can you take the initiative to say that you have a problem? Absolutely not. At times like this, you definitely need a subordinate to jump out and take the blame. And Cyborg is very spiritual. When he becomes the commander-in-chief, if there are any similar problems, he will definitely take the initiative to help us, the 5 old stars, solve our problems, right? We have all said that this matter is not your fault, it is a matter of luck. If there is really someone to hold accountable, CP-0 will also be held accountable. There is a traitor among them, the bearded man said in a deep voice. Warring States immediately understood what was going on with this strange situation. It turned out that the 5 old stars had already poured out their anger on those bitches of CP-0. For our navy, naturally, there is no resentment. I feel relieved now. If you guys can chat more, then I won't be sleepy. Warring States was very smart and thought of something in an instant. He asked, "It's Ogre the one next to Mew?" "That's right. There is no need to hide anything from you. The Queen of Happy Street, Stussy, was previously a senior agent of CP-0 and was responsible for the intelligence work of Orgrim and the Warhammer pirates. But now, it is certain that she betrayed. She joined our world government and the CP organization, and joined the Warhammer pirates. All the plans for previous actions were leaked by her, so much so that our initiative has been turned into passivity, and we don't even know that the situation has changed," the bald king said angrily. The Warring States general was silent for a moment, and then asked what about the control of Happy Street. Long before they left the New World, the power within Happy Street had been cleared by Stussy, and we lost control of Happy Street, the bearded man said softly. Sengoku's face darkened slightly, and then he said, "Has another shortcoming of the Warhammer pirates been fixed?" Roughly the same, the 5 old stars also said with some helplessness. The Warhammer pirates have not been rich for a long time. Although Gangplank has been working on the development of the intelligence department, this thing really takes time to accumulate, so all this time, the intelligence capabilities of the Warhammer pirates can only be said to be barely adequate. It is already very good if they can keep Avalon's information from being leaked and obtain some important information related to themselves. Others, very difficult. For example, Charlotte Lingling knew that there seemed to be a conspiracy brewing against the New World before the Navy took any action, and she made some preparations in advance. But Orgrim, the others, and Enelu were all captured before they reacted. One can imagine the difference here. Now that Happy Street has been incorporated into the Warhammer Pirates system, perhaps there can be a qualitative improvement in intelligence capabilities. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 329. After casually discussing this matter for a few words, the 5 old stars seemed not to want to continue this unpleasant topic. After suffering such a big loss, Willaoxing didn't want to cause trouble to Orgrim anymore in a short period of time. On the other hand, it was also because the 5 old stars realized one thing, that is, they still had the possibility of cooperating with that bastard Orgrim. But now, there is no such opportunity. Before, there was no effective communication channel between the two parties, and the 5 old stars couldn't figure out Orgrim's thoughts at all. Judging from his various actions, it seems that this bastard has trouble with their world government and always likes to cause trouble. But now that I think about it, in fact, these are all because of the addition of a navy in the middle. The 5 old stars mostly know about Orgrim from the navy. With the navy's sense of justice, can they say anything good to Orgrim? But now, they can communicate directly with Orgrim, and there are fewer twists and turns, and they can understand Orgrim's essence more clearly. Although he is a pirate, he pays attention to profits. This is the basis for cooperation between the two parties. There is no chance now, but what about the future? Judging from these various factors, the 5 old stars have temporarily suppressed the idea of dealing with the Warhammer pirates. After all, even if you want to, there is nothing you can do now. Let's not talk about that. How about Zifa's arm? Isn't your Navy's scientific force studying some kind of mechanical power arm? The bearded man suddenly asked. Warring States was stunned for a moment. It was a little strange that the 5 old stars would suddenly care about such a thing. Although Marshal Cyborg was also surprised, he still smiled and said, very good, 2 days. He just put it on his body. If it weren't for his asthma, which caused his poor condition, I even doubt that his strength could be further improved. The bearded man's eyes lit up and he asked, in other words, Dr. Vegapunk's research is very effective. It is very effective, and his scientific research strength is breathtaking, Marshal Cyborg said without hesitation. The 5 old stars were silent for a moment, and then the bald king said, the plan that your navy came up with before. The Warring States general's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he asked, is it the one about PX pacifist? War machine? The bald king nodded, and then said, yes, that's the one. Did the 5 adults approve of that plan? In fact, the power arm this time can be regarded as a kind of front-end and experiment. It can be seen that the effect is very good, the Warring States general asked excitedly. The 5 old stars smiled and said, not necessarily, but it is indeed a means, but your navy wants to rely on this to replace the king's Shishibukai plan. It seems too whimsical, but as a supplement of mid-range power to stabilize the situation on the sea, it may be very good. After a short pause, the bearded man said, Cyborg, Warring States, you too can give us an accurate answer. What else is missing in this plan? Yes, the PX pacifist plan is a means that the Sengoku Navy intends to use to impress the world government and abandon the king's Shishibukai plan. But at present, the 5 old stars still feel that the king's Shishibukai is more dependent on be more careful. However, the Warring States period is not discouraged. This is just the first stage. Starting from this, there will always be opportunities to develop a higher level of combat effectiveness in the future to replace the king's Shishibukai. In fact, for more than 20 years later, Fujitora became a representative of the Navy. An important means used to suppress the Shishibukai was the new war weapon developed by Vegapunk and the Navy. Short of money, Warring States said without hesitation. After a slight pause, he said with some embarrassment, we still lack a suitable material. We are currently eyeing a target and preparing to incorporate it into the king's Shishibukai system. Your navy actually has the idea of recruiting the king's Shishibukai. The bearded man looked at warring states with some surprise and said. After all, although the Shishibukai plan has been implemented, the navy has been holding back for so many years. Now it suddenly said that it would take the initiative. Of course, the 5 old stars were surprised. Although this incident in Moria failed, it did make our navy realize one thing, that is, sometimes, the king's Shishibukai is still very useful. Sengoku nodded and responded. In any case, Moria's performance in this incident was still very good. He didn't mess up anything. It was just because of other pig teammates that he failed. Warring States is a smart man, so he can naturally see this. The 5 old stars nodded with satisfaction, and then asked, who is the target you chose? Tyrant Bartholomew Bear, the Warring States general said without hesitation. The expressions of the 5 old stars were also a little surprised. Yes, he is the former king of Salbi Kingdom. We think he is different from ordinary pirates. He is a person who is very suitable for his position in the Shishibukai. First of all, he is powerful and has the reputation of a tyrant at sea. He has been at sea ever since. Has never been defeated, and has a resounding name in the New World. Secondly, he is different from ordinary pirates. It can be seen that he hates pirates very much in his heart. It can even be said that he hates them. From hanging up until now, he has not attacked the navy once, nor has he robbed any country or ordinary people. On the contrary, he has been committed to combating pirate forces. To be honest, when I was studying his intelligence, I sometimes wondered whether I should absorb him into the Navy's system. Warring States smiled and said. But his identity is rather special, the 5 old stars whispered softly. After thinking for a while, the bearded man said again, but it's not impossible, but you need your navy to strengthen your control over him. He is different from the ordinary Shishibukai under the king. There is no problem with this, I will find a way to solve it. The Warring States general nodded and responded. Very good, then do what your navy wants. In addition, since you have realized the necessity of the king's command of the Shishibukai, then from now on, when the 5 old stars said this, Senguo and Cyborg looked a little embarrassed. So he stopped forcing anything and said instead, anyway, you should pay attention to the rules. Warring States and Cyborg breathed a sigh of relief and said, yes, I understand. Then Warring States asked again, so, 5 my lords, this PX pacifist project. The bearded man was silent for a moment, and then asked how much money is missing. The Warring States general smiled awkwardly, and then said it's hard to estimate. The early research investment must be very huge. I estimate that there will be hundreds of billions of Baileys will be invested, but once the technology matures and can be mass-produced, I estimate, it should be about the same cost as a warship, right? The 5 old stars have a toothache listening to this. This is not a small expense. But when I think about the prospects here, once this technology is formed, the mid-range power of the world government can be effectively supplemented, and even regain control of the sea. So in the end, the 5 old stars nodded and said, we have approved this matter, but in the Warring States period, such a large investment must have output and results. If we really can't see any direction and future, we can't, this plan will be cut off at any time. Yes, guaranteed to complete the task, the Warring States general said excitedly. I thought I would come to Maragio this time to be scolded, but I didn't expect such a good thing to happen. Marshal Cyborg's biggest competitor was directly cut off, and the position of Commander-in-Chief was eliminated. It has almost been locked, and it depends on the timing. And my own words have promoted the progress of the PX pacifist plan. I can get a large amount of funding from the world government. Only when I have money can I do things easily. From the 5th after Lao Xing left the office, Warring States said excitedly, Brother Cyborg, do you feel it? Of course I feel it. Cyborg said with a smile. Yes, as there are more and more pirates on the sea, and the situation in the New World becomes more and more out of control, the 5 old stars may be gradually focusing on the power of our naval headquarters, and no longer want to use CP agencies to interact with us. There are checks and balances, warring states said with some emotion. I think that the 5 old stars have had this idea from a long time ago, but we have not discovered it before. But now, they are more and more aware of the importance of naval power, and they seem a little urgent. Marshal Cyborg said with a smile and a nod. Yes, if you think about it carefully, the main power of the Shishibukai is in the hands of our navy. This is a manifestation. There is also the formation of scientific troops. Maybe our navy will become our own sons, warring states said with a smile. And the fact that the 5 old stars have shown their support for Marshal Cyborg to be the commander-in-chief of the army, isn't it also the tendency of the 5 old stars to focus on the navy? Cyborg looked at the somewhat excited Sengoku, couldn't help but smile, reached out and patted General Sengoku's shoulder, and said, "Don't be too excited. Whether it's the CP agency or our naval headquarters, Sengoku, you must always understand. We are just a sharp sword in the hands of the world government. You have also seen what happened this time. If our navy does not do things well in the future, it is not impossible that the tilt will shift again." The warring states general also calmed down a little, nodded and said, "That's true. In fact, there is no sensory bias in the world government. I just feel that which one between us and the CP agency can better meet the existing needs, so I will choose which one. Just one. Ha ha ha, that's right. From the current point of view, as long as there are no mistakes, I will be the commander-in-chief of the army sooner or later. When the time comes, the navy will be left to you," Cyborg said with a smile. "No, I will still have to rely on you, General Commander, to take care of me when the time comes," Sengoku also said with a smile. At the same time, at Marine Headquarters Marineford, Jun was sitting cross-legged on the lawn in his own courtyard, with Kinpura across his knees, his eyes slightly closed, as if she was meditating. But soon, she withdrew from this state, frowned slightly, and felt a little impatient. It seemed that she could not enter into peace of mind, and there was something lingering in her mind. Here, I recalled the scene in the Devil's Triangle where the warring states general roared angrily, "Let them go. Justice, justice, naval justice," Jun murmured softly. In her heart, the concept of naval justice has been shaken. For some reason, she thought of 2 people in her mind. One was her old enemy, the damn Kazgarot Orgrim, who was looking at her with disdain with a sarcastic smile on her lips. The other one has already left the navy and is now a wanted criminal by the world government, Durag. Jun suddenly realized that these 2 people were much smarter than him. Because I fell into this kind of conceptual confusion, but those 2 guys didn't seem to have this kind of trouble. And in this, Jun seemed to understand what the similarities between the 2 people were. Perhaps it was because of the similarity that they did not feel so confused. That is, whether Orgrim or Durag, there seems to be no pure justice and evil in their hearts. And the reason why I am confused may be because I regard the justice of the navy too purely. Is the navy really the pure justice on the sea? No. No. Jun already had the answer in his mind. For a moment, she thought of the G-5 Navy, the notorious naval base in the New World. Perhaps the justice there is better than that at this headquarters, it needs to be more real, right? Jun lowered his brows slightly and murmured softly. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 330. After sleeping until noon, Orgrim felt refreshed and all the fatigue from last night had disappeared. People are always in pain and happy. Although there is one more word between want and want, the meaning is different. Especially the word still needs to be repeated many times. It doesn't count too many times, after all, durability lies here. But to be honest, no matter how strong you are, in the end, you will only be a tired cow. It seems that he got rid of his former identity as a spy and became a free man in the true sense. Stussy had the air of letting out all the repression that she had accumulated over the years. Orgrim feels that as long as he is in bed, he is her tool. He glanced at Queen Stussy, who was still lying on the bed, exposing her long legs that were unforgettable, looking like she hadn't had enough sleep. Orgrim couldn't help but have a gentle smile on his face, casually put the bed quilt on Stussy's legs, and stretched out a little. After going to wash up, Orgrim wore a pair of black trousers, stripped his muscular upper body, opened the door, and walked out. The air in the courtyard is still so fresh. It is obviously noon, but a full moon is hanging high in the sky. The fluorescent grass planted in the yard emits natural cold light, making the surrounding sight very clear. At a glance, Orgrim saw Lucci and Robin surrounding Enelu. The three of them were chattering about something. Navy hero Garp? In other words, brother Enelu, didn't you lose to that Moonlight Moria? Lucci asked curiously. The hero Garp was the man who destroyed the Rocks pirates back then. There are rumors that he repeatedly refused to be promoted to the position of admiral. His strength is one of the best in the Navy. Even on the sea, he can compete with him. There are not many enemies. Mr. Orgrim seemed to have lost to him back then. If you think about it this way, it is normal for you to lose to him. Enel Robin was like a walking encyclopedia and introduced Garp very skillfully. Lucci was even more surprised when he heard this introduction. Lord Orgrim also lost to him? Lucci asked in surprise. Enero smiled and said now, Lord Orgrim should not lose to Garp again, but indeed, there was almost no power in his hands to fight back. Lucci's eyes flashed and he said excitedly, don't worry, brother Enelu, after I can go to sea, I will definitely help you avenge and defeat Garp. Enelu wanted to say something, but looking at Lucci who was so excited, he finally didn't say anything to attack him. There are countless people in the sea who want to defeat Garp, but so far, Garp Pu is still a hero of the Navy. Needless to say, what does this mean? Although I think Lucci is a bit fanciful, such as defeating Garp as soon as he goes to sea. But Enel does not find it ridiculous. This is a person's direction. In front of the sea, one should have the ambition and self-confidence. Just like me, I encountered many hardships this time and understood many things. But before going to sea, wasn't he the same as Lucci? The same ambition, he wants to compete with the masters all over the world, and he wants to become a new generation of dazzling star on the sea. Although he has failed for the time being, he does not intend to admit defeat. Sooner or later, he, Enero, will still have to return on the sea. He became the pride of the Warhammer pirates. As for Lucci, he just had to work hard with the mood and belief to defeat Garp. He was not going to give Lucci any lectures. There were many things that could not be preached. Useful. Didn't Lord Orgrim warn himself a lot before going to sea? But in the end, only through personal experience can one fully understand. The sea is very fair, and she will teach everyone these principles. Mr. Orgrim, Robin was the first to see Orgrim and called out. Orgrim walked over in amusement, reached out and knocked Robin on the head, and said, why do you start calling me sir? Weren't they all from Orgrim before? I was reading a book recently. The book said that a big man like you needs decency and respect. I think this can show more respect, Robin said very seriously. Orgrim laughed and wanted to tell him that this was the truth in a civilized society. But in this sea, a name means nothing at all. Only with strength can you bring dignity and respect. But looking at Robin's serious expression, Orgrim did not speak in the end. After all, this girl is still young, and she may not become a pirate in the future, so let her take her time. Take your time and get to know the world. By the way, Mr. Orgrim, I would like access to the Great Library of Avalon. Robin said suddenly. Orgrim was stunned for a moment, and then asked, "Don't you have one?" "Do I have it?" Robin was also stunned for a moment and asked. "There should be some, right?" Orgrim touched his chin and said. The Great Library of Avalon is actually the Great Library that Orgrim moved from Shiji. However, after that, it went through several rounds of expansion and it has become richer. For example, the 4 islands around Avalon, almost all the important books they previously owned have been collected in the Avalon Great Library. Don't forget, there is a country here, which was once O'Hara neighboring countries. It can even be said to be the mother country. After all, O'Hara was an autonomous island of the world government. They had no real concept of a country. Although the omniscient tree is big, it cannot store all the books. The one next to it neighboring countries are the real hometowns of many scholars, and the amount of books here cannot be underestimated. Therefore, in the pirate camp, in terms of various knowledge reserves, the Warhammer pirates are actually at the forefront. With their captain Orgrim, the enemy of mankind civilized enslaver, the title of culture destroyer is very inconsistent. Precisely because there is so much precious knowledge in the Great Library of Avalon, no matter what purpose you go in, whether you want to learn powerful power or rich knowledge, you will gain something. Therefore, not many people have access to the Great Library of Avalon. This place is also managed by Katarina de Pen. Only the core cotters of Warhammer pirates, such as Beckman, Gangplank, and others, have the authority to enter and leave here at will. The ordinary cotters at the lower level can only go in once a week. Lower level cotters will only have the opportunity to go in and experience things when they receive some reward. There, you can find all kinds of experiences of the bosses and cotters, such as the 6th form of the Navy, the advancement of the domineering force, the 8 punches, and Orgrim. If you look at it on the sea, this is simply an unparalleled treasure house. Robin is not a member of the Warhammer Pirates, but she is undoubtedly one of the core members of the Warhammer Pirates. Because in the past 2 or 3 years, Robin has been brought up by almost everyone, and he is very familiar with every core cotter. In addition, Robin is very sensible and never annoying, so Lucci is often disliked by everyone, and he even gets beaten from time to time. But as for Robin, he is everyone's little treasure. That's why Orgrim believed that Robin should have already had this kind of permission to enter the Great Library. Regardless of whether it exists or not, it will start today. Orgrim reached out and rubbed Robin's head and said. Robin nodded with a smile, very happy, and then she seemed to be thinking about something again, and asked Mr. Orgrim, "Everyone should have their own creed. I also want to understand these, but I am a little confused. I asked Neiman and Sphinx and got their answers. Now I want to ask you." "Oh? What's their answer?" Orgrim asked curiously. Sister Neiman said, "Muscles are the power that interprets everything," Robin replied immediately. Orgrim smiled and said, as expected of her. "In the words of the Sphinx," she said, "there is nothing that fire power cannot destroy, and if there is, there just isn't enough fire power." Robin answered again. "Gee, ha 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 ha, this is indeed the creed of the Sphinx." Orgrim laughed. Then he was stunned for a moment, then looked at Lucci and asked, "By the way, where is the Sphinx? Why haven't you seen her these days?" Lord Orgrim, don't you know? The devilish woman Sphinx left with Boss Sky, saying she was going to find Mr. Doflamingo, as if she had something important to do." Lucci responded quickly. Since Enelu's strength has increased greatly, the Sphinx can no longer bully Enelu, but Robin is very well behaved and quiet, and the Sphinx is embarrassed to bully Robin. So Lucci became a victim, and was tortured to death by the Sphinx. He would turn Lucci into a little leopard at every turn, and then put an apple or something on his head. Therefore, in Lucci's mouth, the Sphinx became a devil woman. Doflamingo, Orgrim reached out and touched his chin, murmuring strangely. "I wonder what the Sphinx did to him." But he didn't mind his own business. "Mr. Orgrim, You haven't answered me yet, Robin asked, raising his little hand. Gee ha 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 ha, is this my creed? Orgrim laughed first, and then said only strength can decide everything. Only strength can decide everything? Robin murmured a few words softly. Orgrim asked with a smile, how is it, do you have a creed? Got it figured out? Not yet, but seems to have some ideas, Robin said excitedly. What idea? Orgrim asked again. Knowledge is power, Robin squeezed his little hand, made a fist gesture, and said proudly. Gee ha 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 ha, it's a good saying. Implementing one's creed will eventually become belief. This is the fundamental way for a person to become powerful. Without enough belief, it is impossible to support one's own strength. Work hard, Orgrim reached out and knocked Robin's little head and said. Without enough faith, you simply cannot support your own strength, Enel murmured softly. Then he looked at Orgrim and couldn't help but think in his heart, what is my belief? Let thunder become the glory of Avalon, Enel murmured softly. Then, a smile soon appeared on the corner of his mouth. He looked at Orgrim, and suddenly said, Lord Orgrim, sooner or later I will become your pride. Orgrim was stunned for a moment. Why did this kid suddenly get into trouble? Could it be that you are old? No, isn't he already 20? But looking at Enel's serious expression, Orgrim smiled and said, you are my pride, Enel. At this moment, wearing a pink velvet pajamas and a Stussy, who was wearing a mushroom nightcap, suddenly opened the door, yawned and said, what are we discussing so early in the morning? It's so noisy that I can't even sleep. It's already noon, Sister Stussy. Robin said with a smile. Yeah? Stussy was stunned for a moment, then stretched out her hand to touch her face and said, that's not possible, I'm going to get some beauty sleep after saying that. Stussy turned around and went back to sleep. Orgrim asked in surprise, Huon, do you really not care about the street? Didn't I already arrange for Manda to cooperate with Gangplank? She is mine and will not cause any trouble. After Gangplank integrates Happy Street with the intelligence department of the Warhammer Pirates, I will no longer be involved in Happy Street, Stussy waved her hands and said with a yawn. Then, without waiting for Orgrim to say anything else, Stussy closed the door and there was no movement. This woman, could it be that she is going from a queen to a ruined house? Then wouldn't I have suffered a huge loss, Orgrim murmured helplessly. Sure enough, once people have support, they will become lazy. Although he was thinking about this in his mind, he looked at Lucci, who was arguing with Robin again, and looked at Annie. Lou, looking at the closed door, Orgrim couldn't help but smile and said, this kind of life is quite good.